hello everybody, welcome. We have around 30 participants now. And I see many familiar names and faces. Feel free to turn on your camera if you want to say a quick hello, or you can remain with your camera off. But I would like to ask everybody to be on mute so as not to disrupt the discussion, if that's okay. So you can click the mute button on your bottom left. Also, please be mindful that this webinar is recorded. Okay, so if you don't want to be recorded, keep your cameras off. In the final recording, you're not gonna appear, so be assured for that. Only the speakers will appear in the final recording. So maybe we can now start. So good morning, good evening. I'm mindful that some of you are in different time zones. Welcome to this special event celebrating the launch of my book, Air Traffic Management, Principal Performance and Markets. For those who don't know me, I'm Marina Efthymiou and I work for Dublin City University as an associate professor in aviation management. Before joining academia, I worked for Eurocontrol, the European Organization for the Safety of Air Navigation, while I was doing my PhD on aviation policy and governance, looking at emissions trading scheme and the single European sky, trying to navigate this novel area of ATM. So as a PhD researcher coming from a management lens, it was very challenging for me to find peer-reviewed research on air traffic management that was not written for airspace engineers. So with that in mind, I envision this book to be a point where academia meets the industry and discusses elements of air traffic management that have a management policy and strategy significance. So it's truly an honor to stand before you today to introduce this groundbreaking work that hopefully promises to be a beacon of knowledge and innovation in the field of ATM. So Air Traffic Management, Principal Performance and Market, the very long title of the book. It serves a guiding light in the ever-changing sector. We have seen the growth of air traffic that has stimulated demand for efficient air traffic management, and that has never been greater. So this book delves deep into the intricacies of air traffic control, exploring the principles, the performance metrics, and the market that underpin this critical industry. So it's not only a resource for professionals and scholars in the field, but also an invaluable, hopefully, tool for policymakers and aviation enthusiasts who seek to understand the complexities of this ecosystem. Moreover, this book addresses the ever-present challenges and opportunities that lie ahead. Then by doing so, it provides hopefully a roadmap for a more efficient, safe, and environmentally conscious aviation system. Both Eurocontrol and EASA, the European Aviation Safety Agency, they wrote forwards for this book, highlighting its importance for the industry. This book is published by Routledge and has 12 peer-reviewed chapters with more than 14 contributors from both industry and academia. 4 of them are in the panel today, and a few more are among us today. The academic and industry contributors of this book, they have a wealth of experience in the ATM industry, and their commitment to advancing this field is evident, I think, in every page of this publication. So I hope that this book will serve as a resource for industry professional researchers and students alike, and it will contribute significantly to advancement of aviation and, more importantly, air traffic management. So I would like to thank those who have supported and participated in the creation of this book, and there are many of them, and I'm very grateful for their help. I want to highlight that earnings of this book go to support the very significant work of Orbis. So before we move to the panel discussion and me introducing the 4 experts, I would like to give the floor to Diana. So Diana, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much, Marina. And it sounds great. This is really exciting, and congratulations to you for launching the book. And I would like to thank you for donating the royalties of this book to Orbis. your generosity really reflects the generosity of the entire aviation industry towards Orbis since we were founded right back in 1982. So the aviation industry has really shown no limits to its commitment to Orbis, especially in Ireland. And there is nothing we have thrown at you that you haven't raised to the challenge and shown determination and loyalty to raise money and support Orbis. So just to give a bit of background, I suppose, the alliance between the aviation industry and medicine originated way back in the 1960s, when a group of pilots and medical experts recognised the severe need for eye care services in low and middle income countries. And then in 1973, Orbis was launched. To give you a bit of a background of the sort of statistics, really, 153 million people worldwide are blind or visually impaired. And that includes myself, as I wear glasses, and many of you on the call today also. But unfortunately, in many places, that the provision of glasses just isn't possible. And unfortunately, 1.4 million children are blind globally. And it is devastating to think that a massive 50% of those cases could have been prevented or cured. And that's really where Orbis comes in. Today, we span worldwide, bringing people together to fight avoidable blindness where the need is the greatest. Our story is really about giving people their sight back and building a legacy of quality eye care that eliminates avoidable blindness. So back in 1980, after we launched, United Airlines donated a DC-8 aircraft to Orbis, which became the very first flying eye hospital. I'm sure many of you have heard of the Flying Eye Hospital, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you that the Douglas DC-8 is an American 4-engine plane, which was in production until 1972. The Flying Eye Hospital was and still is the world's only fully accredited ophthalmic teaching hospital. Our plane allows our clinical team and world-leading volunteer faculty, who are basically medical experts who give up their time and to travel the world, sharing their knowledge and developing the skills of eye care professionals in communities that need it most. Since 1980, we've had 2 upgrades to the Flying Eye Hospital. The first was in 1992, when we replaced the DC-8 with a DC-10. And then in 2016, when FedEx donated an MD-10. So the 3rd generation of the Flying Eye Hospital can now fly nearly twice as far as its predecessor. It needs a smaller runway to land and requires only 2 pilots rather than 3. And as we rely on volunteer pilots to fly the aircraft, this is a huge benefit. The plane is currently in Zambia at the moment, and just on Friday, it completed a 3-week project. So what really happens during these programs is the team arrives 2 weeks before the plane, and they visit partner hospitals and health centres, just to really learn about the facilities that are available in the country. They also identify a number of cases, and then those cases are invited onto the plane for treatment. As I said, the aircraft is completely fitted out as now a hospital. Business class is now a classroom. And then beyond that, there is a operating room and a recovering room. So the cases are brought on, as well as the anaesthetist, optometrist, ophthalmologist, all the eye care people in the country come on to get trained. And they sit in the classroom while the medical volunteers and the Flying Eye Hospital team are in the operating room with the cases. So it's more quality versus quantity. So what we're doing is training, and we're using the facilities that they have to show them how to use their equipment. It's fitted with audio visual that allows training participants to watch surgeries in the operating room live, and a microphone so that they can ask questions throughout. The aircraft also has like a state-of-the-art mobile simulation center. So just as pilots learn to fly planes through simulation training, eye care teams build their skills and confidence safely before progressing to real-life surgeries. So since 1982, following the Flying Eye Hospital visits, Orbis has recognised the need in certain countries. And starting in the 1990s, long-term country programs were established in Bangladesh, China, India, Vietnam, and Ethiopia, due to the enormous need for basic eye care training. Today, Orbis has 60 eye care projects across 11 countries. And one of the avoidable diseases that Orbis is working to eliminate is trachoma. And in Ethiopia, especially, the prevalence of avoidable blindness from diseases like trachoma is one of the highest in the world. Trachoma is highly infectious, and it can devastate people, families, and communities. And if it's left untreated, repeated trachoma infections could develop. And the eyelid, because it's bacteria, the eyelid turns inwards and scratches painfully against the cornea. And ultimately, it leads to irreversible blindness. So Orbis is working to eliminate this disease before it robs more people of their sight. So we conduct surgeries to reverse the effect of the eyelid turning inwards. We distribute antibiotics, which are donated by Pfizer, and they are distributed annually to millions of people. We treat about 95% of our project areas. We teach about facial and hand cleanliness in order to prevent eye disease, and then we work with our wash partners to improve quality and clean water. Trachoma was only eliminated from Ireland in the 1950s, and that was when we improved our sanitation here. So that is really at the crux of this. Over the past 4 decades, thanks to our compassionate supporters, 3 generations of the Flying Eye Hospital have taken world-class training to eye care teams in over 95 countries and have been a call to action for better eye care worldwide. Wherever it lands, it raises awareness, creates change, and rallies supporters from local governments, global organisations, and philanthropists to the general public, all going down the mission of the global fight to end avoidable blindness. And just to finish, I wanted to turn to the words of Kofi Annan, who spoke of Orbis during his time as UN Secretary General. And he said, "There are few occasions in life when an idea takes off and leads to achievements beyond our wildest expectations. When a mission is driven by a vision so clear and compelling that it literally enables others to see it too. Orbis is one of these." Thank you very much for having me today, and I'd love to share some more information about Orbis and what we do, and I'll put them in the links if that's okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Diane. It's a fantastic cause. There are many NGOs. I think this is a unique NGO that it has very strong correlation also with air transport. Myself, I found out about Orbis through another colleague and friend, Frankie O'Connell, who did the same thing as I did. And hopefully with Diane being here, more people will be encouraged to support Orbis, either through publications, donating loyalties of their publications, or raising awareness. So Diane, please do put the contact details in the chat and some more information and spread the word. Okay, so without any further ado now, we can continue with the webinar, more of the content of the air traffic management. So I would like to introduce our key 4 experts and contributors to this book. I'm very grateful to every single one of them, and also the remaining contributors. As I said, the book has 14 contributors. So I'm gonna start with Francois Huet. I met Francois when I was at Eurocontrol. We had a chat earlier on, and I remember the very first day that I met him. So Francois is currently the Policy and Regulatory Director for Borealis Alliance. Since 1992, he has been working in and with several European entities. In Eurocontrol, a secretary to the diplomatic group for the revision of the convention and secretary to the committee for route charges in the European Commission, a desk officer for the performance and charging regulations under the Single European Sky second package in the CESAR joint undertaking as master plan program manager for 2015 and 2020 update. And he has contributed with a very significant book chapter. We're going to talk about that later on. So I'm going to continue introducing the second speaker. So we have Dr. Marek Becker. He has been in the aviation sector since 1993, and he has a master's and a PhD from the University of New South Wales in Sydney, where he lectures also on air traffic management. He held different operational and management roles for the Swiss air navigation service provider Skyguide, where he was the ATM director for Zurich. Since then, Marek has provided consulting services to institutional, regulatory, and commercial sectors, and he is the senior vice president for the Swedish ANSP ACR. Then we also have here Anna Tomova. I remember Anna since I was a PhD student, that somebody pointed me out this woman and said, this woman is one of the few women working on ATM. So Anna is a professor at the Faculty of Operation and Economics of Transport and Communications in the University of Žilina in the Slovak Republic. She is responsible for the courses of Airline Economics, Airport Economics, and Air Navigation Services Economics. She participated in European projects in the field of air transportation research, swimsuit at HARD. She took participation in European education project CAT, the Knowledge Alliance in Air Transport. And she has been covering a very important book chapter looking at next gen and single European sky. Then last but not least, we have here Keith McEvoy, who is an air traffic controller with the Irish air navigation service provider AirNav. He has previously held the position of Deputy Operation Manager for Dublin Air Traffic Control and is currently the ANSP's Manager's ATM Standards and Procedures. Keith, during his career, has contributed to numerous projects, including the development of ATS procedures for the introduction of the Northern Parallel Runway at Dublin Airport. Keith, he is also one of our own, and he did his master's in aviation leadership, where he excelled, and he worked on unbundling of their navigation services. So please join me in welcoming those four key experts in the discussion today. And I'm gonna jump directly into the main topic, air traffic management. We're going to look more on the market structure today, and we're going to discuss very critical topics that 10 years since I started my PhD, they're still quite relevant and quite important. So maybe I will start with Francois. Francois, I hope you don't mind. Maybe you can give a little bit of a description of your book chapter and what you covered in your book chapter, if that's okay. And you are on mute.
Sorry, the usual mistake. Thank you, Marina. I'll do my best. Yes. I need to say first that whatever I say will reflect my personal opinion and not the opinion of the people who employ me. That's important to say. The second thing I wanted to say is that I'm extremely grateful to you, Marina, for having given me the opportunity to contribute. As I said earlier when we were preparing the meeting, I'm not an academic, so it's very good sometimes to, in a way, be forced to stop and think a little bit. And when you allocated to me this chapter on the legal environment of INSPs, I said to myself, wow, that's not the sexiest chapter in the book. So what can I do to make it readable and try to make it appealing for students, not to drop it after the first page? And I thought that because of my respectable age, and you said it, I've worked around quite a lot in Brussels in several institutions, I thought it might be useful for this young generation to be reminded of where we come from, why we are here, and therefore where we may want to go together. And this is why in my introduction, I try to make a little bit of history, and I've seen that Marek has done a little bit the same. I think it's important to remember that the situation we're in today has not always been like this. Since World War II, when civil air traffic really took off in particular because of the technology gains from the World War II, sadly, with the jet engines, etc. In the beginning, it was completely funded by states and the airlines as well, by the way. We had literally these flag carriers who were carrying the flag of the home country everywhere in the world, be it to the colonies or to the empire, to the Commonwealth, to the overseas territories for those who had one. So it was really a demonstration of that the states were back and booming after World War II. And it's only in the 70s that people started thinking, well, now that traffic is really booming, it might be a good idea that the passengers start paying for the services for their travels and the services that they gain from the state in air navigation services provision. And but it was gradual. And it's only in 81 that in Europe, there was the idea and the implementation of a 100% cost recovery. This was then embedded in the Eurocontrol multilateral agreement, the route charges system. But we were still with, even though there were privatization of the airlines gradually, we were still with completely state-owned air navigation service providers. And again, in Europe, because it can be, and it is different in other areas of the world, the first one to start deriving from this state status and full cost recovery mechanism was the UK NATS in 1998, if I'm not wrong, which forced the Eurocontrol route charges system to really evolve. And I was there when it happened in the large committee for route charges. It caused quite a stir because it was a little bit shaking the tree of all these NSPs having all their costs recovered. As you know, the costs that are planned are never the actual cost, and the traffic that is planned is never the actual traffic. So there was an adjustment in N+2, but for the first time ever, UK said, I want to do it differently. And it was a prerequisite to the partial privatization of NATS. And they said, let's implement economic regulation. Let's separate the regulator from the air navigation service providers. And it created quite a shock in the large committee of route charges. You know, we said once more, the UK do it their own way. But it was, in fact, they were right before the others, again, in Europe, because gradually, when the Commission took over the competence over the ATM and started developing the CES1 package and the CES2 package, the idea of separation between air navigation service providers and NSA became a rule. It was embedded in the first package with the creation of the NSAs, even though the separation was sometimes more virtual than effective. And then the economic regulation came with the CES2 package that I had the privilege to contribute to, and we were in it together, Marina. So, there was quite an evolution from completely state-owned and financed to separation, NSA service provider, and then economic regulation, and then performance scheme and evolution of the charging regulation in 2010 for a performance scheme that started in 2012. And what I find now interesting is to try to figure out where the discussions that are ongoing now will take us in the near future. And this is where I think it's very interesting to try to put our heads together, bounce back ideas with a panelist and hopefully with the participating guests as well. When you look closely at the CES2 Plus package, and I did, and I see that the other participants today are doing it as well, is that I have the feeling that the Commission wants to say, I'm a rule maker, I'm a lawmaker, I'm not an oversight body. I want to make the law, and then I would like to give this out to a European regulator. In this case, this would be the PRB, with decision-making power. And what do I want to regulate? I want to regulate what is a natural monopoly, i.e. the en route air traffic services, because this is the responsibility under the Chicago Convention for the states to be responsible for the airspace and facilitate overflight, at least. So the Commission agrees, I think, that they want to concentrate on en route ATSP designated on a monopoly basis. There can be only one ATSP at the same time in the same airspace. And then they say, Once this is done with a powerful economic regulation, and there will be a mature regulation between air traffic service providers and route air traffic service providers and the European regulator, this will work. And then what's below, the infrastructure, the CNS, the IAS, the MET, and the terminal services. My idea, says the Commission, is that it should be given to the market. And then if it's given to the market, I don't need to care about it. Market will rule. And this is, it's often challenged, but this is the basic mindset of the Commission. They have very frequently a trend to say that if it's under a competition, if it's under market condition, then the market will rule, and then I don't have to pay any more attention to it, except from a distance. And that's the subsidiarity, proportionality principle of the Commission. So there is, I think, this tension between the public service obligation from the Chicago Convention and trend towards unbundling and opening to market condition. And I think this is one of the issues that it would be great to, if we were having the time to discuss today. I don't know whether I've already exceeded my time or whether I'm within the time expected. Marina, you tell me.
No, Francois, you have done a fantastic job. I think you covered some of the key topics that are also covered in the book. I'm mindful that some of the participants today, some of those concepts might be new to them, because as we said earlier on, ATM is a significantly under-researched area. So if you do want to learn more about the exciting things that Francois covered earlier on, I have a discount code for the book, so you can use ATM30. That will give you a discount when you order the book. Also, I would like at this stage to encourage everybody to put any questions that they might have for the panelists in the chat. And I'm going to take some of the points that Francois made earlier on and pass the discussion. So you said that we do have to make this call of, is AMS a public service, a commodity? And when we consider the market acting as monopolies, is there any room for liberalization? Is there any room for removing this airspace sovereignty article in the Chicago Convention? And if we hypothetically do that, how will this impact the global ANS industry? And that's a question I would like to ask Anna, if that's okay. So Anna, is that room for removing the airspace sovereignty? And if there is, are there alternatives that might be driven by modern ANS technologies?
So at first, I would like to introduce myself more, if I'm allowed. I would like to add to Francois that I'm a representative of academy here, and I am responsible for the course of Air Navigation Services Economics in my university, and I have, we can say, 10 years experience in the field of didactics of these subjects. So I'm an author of the chapter which is named Structural Reform of Air Navigation Services Industry from Next Generation to Single European Sky. And what I would like to say is that any structural reform is a significant supply side change of any industry. The term structural reform was historically used mainly in connection with other infrastructure industries, not with air navigation service and air navigation service providers. So my role in this chapter was to bring new terminology in the context of air navigation service industry. So not only market, open access or liberalization, but also incumbent, legacies, third parties, all these terminology is explained in my chapter. In this chapter, I discuss not only the evolution of single European sky reform, structural reform, transnationally driven reform, as Francois said, governed by the European Commission, but also I explain here technological reform, the relation between technological reform and economic and regulation reform of the A&S industry. I explained in my chapter also different motivations which were behind this structural reform, not only technology changes in the industry, but also many incentives generated from air carriers. So your question was about, hypothetically, some airspace which could be fully open market if there would be no sovereignty clause stemming from the Chicago Convention. It is really, at the day, really very hypothetical question. But we can say that, in principle, modern technologies are drivers and could be drivers for a different supply of air navigation services, or at least some of them in different phases. And what I would like to add that why this is only a hypothetical question at the day. The principle of sovereignty relates not only to the delivery of air navigation services, but it relates also to the delivery of air transportation services, which are governed from the text of Chicago Convention by bilateral air service agreements. There are only small pieces of multilateral agreed rules. Generally, the delivery of air traffic services, in the sense of air transportation services, are governed by air service agreements between countries or international economic grouping of countries. So in my chapter, I wanted to demonstrate that there is not only the European Union, for which the issues of structural reforms are very urgent and actual, but there are also other worlds or other regions in the world. For example, as Asia, integration grouping in Asia, in which these issues such as integration of airspace, or we can say liberalization used as a tool for integrating the delivery of air navigation services within this region, are extremely important nowadays. So what I see the future development in the delivery of air navigation services as not only a very attractive field of study, but I see it also as a very attractive field of future research. For example, do we distinguish between liberalization strategies of European and, if any, non-European countries? What do we know about new entrants from the point of view of their business strategies, business models? What do we know nowadays with regard to the status of these new entrants in the liberalized markets with air navigation services? Have they any links to so-called legacies in the historically in the market with air navigation services? Then we can ask which countries are not only exploiting the benefits of liberalized markets with mainly terminal air navigation services, and which of them are actively exploiting the liberalized markets route. All these issues are related to the content of my chapter, and I would like to thank you, Marina, that I could be participant and contributor in this very useful and I hope attractive textbook, not only for European citizens, but also for students, citizens, academics abroad. So
thank you very much, Anna. I think, Anna, there you opened the Pandora box with many topics, and hopefully if we do have any students, researchers among us, those are topics that they will start developing a keener interest. We have been talking about the liberalization of the ATM for a number of years now, and there are various opinions about its progress. We have seen technological innovations coming up, and at the same time, we have been discussing the willingness of states to liberalize and change the market structure. At the same time, you mentioned a number of states that they have been maybe more progressed in that journey than others. And we have seen also some progress when we separate en route with terminal air navigation services. And on that note, I would like to pass the floor to Marek. So Marek, you have been working a lot on the terminal air navigation services, also through your involvement with ACR. So if you could share your thoughts on how things have worked on TANS and making some comments about the liberalization element and the competition element, and even potentially thinking if that can be expanded into an en route segment.
Okay, thanks, Marina. Well, where to start? When you asked me to write a book about the markets, about the business framework of ANSP, I was thinking, my instant reaction was business framework, a vertically integrated monopoly ANSP working in a cost recovery scheme doesn't really have to be doesn't really need any business thinking, because it's everything set on a plate. Everything is there. So, but then of course, if you when I put my head around it, and my experience now working for ACR in some pockets of a deregulated ANS market, you understand that business in ANS, you cannot see this in isolation. It is very closely connected to the pricing, to the regulatory framework, and it's embedded in these other areas, which are as well covered in your book. So I want to pick up a little bit on where Francois started off. He mentioned the airlines, and the issues that I'm confronted with when I'm talking about that we are a privatized ANSP and we would like to see more liberalization. Then we're getting the same reaction from people as the airlines got in the 80s. Oh my God, safety will decline. You will set profit higher than safety, and all these I would say statements which actually lack evidence, because if you look at the airline sector, nothing of that sort has happened. It's created new business models. The service arguably got better across the board. The same happened actually to the airports. When the airports deregulated and became private, airports today are completely different experience than they were 20, 30 years ago. And my challenge then here is, why treat ANS differently? Give me one reason why this should be treated in a different way than airlines, airports, or for that sake, other public utilities like energy, railroad, telecommunication, you name it. Experience in those sectors have as well shown that allowing competition, allowing market in itself will already, independent who then actually wins the contract, will already trigger changes amongst the suppliers. I just give you one example before I come to your en route question. We were bidding for a service in a European country for a tower, which had been serviced by the incumbent monopoly provider in all years. And then they tendered the service out, and we did the bidding, and we didn't win. Who won was the incumbent that had serviced the airport before. So what they did was actually they were providing the identical service with the identical people in the identical framework, just minus 40% cost. Why? simply because there was competition in the market. So when this is said, you see all these pockets that have been liberalized, be it training, be it terminal ANS in certain countries, be it CNS. You get cost pressure on the costs, and you get new business models, and you get actually more satisfied customers. So the question is, why are we not doing it? Why are we not doing what the European Commission is wanting, to create two business areas, one regulated business areas which contains services which are relevant to the national security. That can be en route or not, that can be access to military training areas for the Air Force, and everything else, let the market take care of that. Why is this unbundling? I'm very curious to hear what Keith has to say about that. Why is this unbundling so difficult to achieve? So these will be the thoughts I had when I wrote the chapter about business framework. Now, to your question, we provide terminal ANS, and we've been thinking, how is this possible to expand this into the en route segment? And now my answer would be theoretically yes. In reality, probably no, at least not in the short midterm, because you need to have a regulatory framework that is ready. I think the technology is not there yet. And most importantly, the market actors are not ready yet. I think let the participants collect experience in other, segments first. Let them gain experience in regional airports, in technology, in data services. And once they see, oh, actually, this is not so bad. Actually, we're all benefiting from this. Maybe sometime in the future, there will be possible to expand it into the en route, independent of sovereignty aspects, because you can just put requirements onto the provider which respects your sovereignty. So I think that's a bit of an overblown argument that this should not be possible. So that was it. Did that answer your question?
It did answer my question very well. I think you are one of the few private TANs, and we do need to go beyond TANs and liberalize the market and allow competition for that to become more efficient. So then some of the questions that also the audience having here is why the progress have been slow. And another question that is popping up to me immediately is that if we do have a progress on that, in the event of the full liberalization, what are the characteristics that ANSPs should have? And I would like to pass that question to Keith. Keith, I know that this is a tough question, but I think you addressed that quite well in your chapter.
Yeah, thanks, Marina. Just to acknowledge something Mark said there about, like, I'm coming from this from a slightly different point of view. I work for an ANSP, in the monopolistic environment, I suppose, and I think ultimately ANSPs are afraid of going towards this unbundling and liberalization of airspace because it's probably seen as a risk. And as I said, I'm coming from the ANSP side. And Marina, your question there on the characteristics. So as part of my chapter on the unbundling, I was looking more at en route airspace because it's only done in small pockets. If you take, for example, the Maastricht upper airspace over Europe. And I suppose for an ANSP to adapt from the monopolistic environment into the open market, that they're going to need a number of characteristics. Quite simply, a strong technology background, proven adaptability and flexibility is key to adapt to the new environment. Mature SMS systems, that has to be a player, and without a mature SMS system, I don't think an ANSP is going to be strong enough to go forward and to take advantage of an open market. And again, I'm coming from this from an AirNav Ireland point of view, where we've just split from the Irish Aviation Authority. We're now a standalone commercial entity, and with that, this is new to us. And so another key characteristics for ANSPs is to have a commercial element to the business. We are a service provider who is not up to speed on markets and market conditions. And so that's a key part as well for ANSPs. Another one, and it came from my research on the chapter, is strong player and alliances, I think is going to be a big key. So I use the example in the chapter of the Coupons Alliance, of which AirNav is part of, sharing technological advances, technological ideas, right down to, the interoperability of the coupon system across the 8 or 9 different states in the alliance that could be done real time. And then you have Borealis Alliance from Francois and the A6 Alliance. So I think they're the ANSPs who have those characteristics are going to be the strong players in an open market. And just to add, Marina, it's thank you for inviting me to this. It was a great honor to write the chapter for the book, and particularly to see some names here who I had the privilege of researching when I did my thesis, and I had the privilege to interview Francois and Marek as well. So you got some great knowledge, but I hope that answers your question, Marina.
It does answer my question. Thank you very much, Keith. Also to declare that those positions are your own positions and not of your employer, because when Keith and I wrote that chapter, it was more of an independent point of view, and they are not fully aligned, not necessarily aligned with what ERNAV believes. But I think you touched some important points there, and that makes me also think it was also in the questions here why the progress has been so slow. And I looked at that also in my own PhD, and you wonder, you have a number of countries with different capabilities. Each one of them, they will have their own national ANSPs. Some of them, for geopolitical reasons, they might not be willing to open up, liberalize the market, and they want to remain acting as a natural monopoly with significant consequences for the passenger, the welfare, the airspace users, and also in many cases they might be left behind technologically. So I spent at least 4 years trying to find out why. I think I did find out why. I still don't have an answer on the how, because to a large extent that comes down to willingness of states to change the way they have been operating, and also considering the negotiating power, the influence ANSPs have on the Department of Transport for taking those critical decisions. With that note, I want to highlight again that please do ask any questions in the chat, and we're going to be addressing them in this discussion. I have already seen some of you already responding and raising questions on that. And I would like maybe to ask a few more questions on the performance, if that's okay, and grasp the knowledge of the 4 key experts here. So Anna, I don't know if you have any thoughts on how can we measure and monitor the performance of the ANSPs, either being in the matter of key performance areas like environment, safety, capacity, and cost efficiency, or degrees of liberalization?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that we need the comprehensive data set, and we don't have such data set. There are some information produced by Liberalization Institute, but in the European Union, for which the integration of airspace is a critical issue, also from the point of view of the European Union competitiveness in the world aviation and the world economy too, we don't have such data set. What we need is the data about the numbers of third parties, their product portfolio. We also need some performance data in service units. Also, it is necessary to have some data supporting that the role of liberalization is to create pressure on cost efficiency. So this delivery in the field of cost efficiency is not generally known in the European Union. What we need is also monitoring of some further performance ratios and indicators, not only economic and financial ones in this context. Also, as I have said, it is necessary to have also information on ownership status, asset issues, technologies used, and some technological visions, strategic technological plans. We don't have such data set for the European Union in complexity, which is needed to support the integration issues in the European airspace. As I explained to my students, this is not a lecture, of course, but I am a teacher, what to do. But I think that this slow progress in the liberalization issues in the airspace is not hidden only in some missing data and data sets, but also it is hidden in the field of education. This is my idea that there was a gap in the European Union and in the world in the field of such textbooks focused on air traffic management from the point of view of principles, performance, and markets. So I think that what we need is not only air traffic management textbook, but also a very well-built educational courses in the European Union. I have a small experience. I explained these issues to some doctoral student, and he was air traffic controller. And he said to me, finally, I understood the most important issues so far. I was supported by many courses out of university, but finally, I understand. So I think that what is necessary to do for a bigger progress in the field of liberalization of air navigation services in the European Union is to support human pillar of single European sky, delivering in European universities such courses. This is my viewing of the problem. And the second one is naturally generated national resistance in some countries against the idea of the integration of European airspace. So this is a political and economic problem in slow process of the single European sky and more markets in the delivery of air navigation services in the European Union.
Thank you, Anna. I know that Francois wants to jump in there. Before I let Francois add some comments, just to highlight again what you said earlier on. I think as we are progressing with the liberalization element and the structural separation and actual separation between the regulator and the provider, I think there is a need for new competencies. There is a need for education of all those involved in the ATM air traffic management system to understand the economics behind, to understand competition law, to understand the need for measuring performance beyond the performance regulation. And again, that gap of competencies, because there is a gap of competencies, it takes a while for that to be filled. And I think we all agree that raising awareness, discussing those topics, sharing the information, either that being through data sharing for informed decisions, both for academia and industry, but also having these high-level discussions on how the liberalization, how the market can improve in order to improve the performance for the airspace users and everybody involved in this complex system. So, Francois, I don't know if you have any views on that, or if you want to share any ideas on the data sharing. I know for a fact that because civil aviation authorities and ANSPC in a number of countries that have been a single entity for a number of years, those data in many cases don't exist, and now we're building up their own data projects and data monitoring. And again, those data are not available for independent researchers who want to understand a bit more on the complex issues of ATM.
Yeah, well, where to start, as Marek was saying earlier on. First of all, if I may just say before trying to answer the question, that if we are collectively thinking that the way to better performance is towards going towards market condition, I think that Marek is showing us the way, in that it should start, and it starts with terminal navigation services. This is where there is no sovereignty issue, no overflight, no airspace issue, and this is where the competition works and has proven to work for the benefit of the customers, airlines, passengers, and citizens. I think that the unbundling of en route services is much trickier, not even necessarily desirable. I have doubts about that. I've seen with a lot of interest Keith's words about the possibility to unbundle en route services. I think that even the Commission in its SES2+ proposal has given up on that, is that acknowledged the fact that it is a state topic with a single air traffic service provider for en route, which is designated on an exclusive basis in an airspace. So even the Commission, at least for now, for the short and probably medium term, doesn't see it happening. So I wanted to react on that first, and then I wanted about the reason why it goes so slow. It's because there is a lot of volatility in our business. We had the economic crisis of 2008 and 10, and then we had the COVID, and now we have Ukraine, and we have now the Middle East with Gaza and Israel. And we have to remember that we had a drop in traffic of 85% in the first weeks of the COVID. The airlines had no passengers, the airspace was closed, except for repatriation flight or cargo flights. So there was no money in the system. And now both airlines, INSPs, airports are struggling to get back to financial health. And this is, I think, one explanation of the fact that it's very hard to make costs decrease for the time being, because everybody was choking under the financial strain of the crisis. And now with Ukraine, you have states that have lost again half of their traffic because they were depending on the overflights to the Russian airspace, which is gone now, and others that have too much traffic that they cannot accommodate because the diverted traffic goes on their territory. So it's very, very tricky. And I wanted to say that it's of course a question of education, and I'm glad about your initiative, as Anna said, because it helps raising awareness of all the topics, but it's a very complex business we're working in, very volatile, with very small benefit margins. So if petrol increases or if traffic drops, you can easily go into the red line and lose money instead of earning money. So that's very tricky. I wanted also to say, and I'm sorry to be a little bit long because I've not yet answered the question, but I'm a little bit surprised to read in the chat that Cesar has limited the research on ATM. I'm a little bit surprised with that, because with due respect to this comment, I don't perceive it in the same way. I think that Cesar has done a lot, and if you read the master plan and its vision for full automation, virtualization, dynamic service provision, cross-border use of space technology, I think they are really showing the way where we should want to go. What's restraining this vision is the implementation. It's not the R&D. The technology is delivering, it's the deployment. And there are good and bad reasons for deploying or not deploying. The main one is standardization, interoperability, which are technological obstacles. And another one is probably the investment cycles of the investors, and also because of the situation, the inability to invest vast sums of money into something that would deliver benefits. But enough said, I just wanted to bounce back on the questions that I was reading on the chat and from our colleagues from the panel about the data sharing. It's true that each vertically integrated INSP, as I think Mark describes them, or maybe it's Keith, I don't remember in which chapter it said, the vertical integrated INSPs, they have all their own set of data. And again, the problem for sharing is interoperability, the format of the data. Again, there is the security of data, the integrity of data. And when I ask my my ANSPs, I say my NSPs because I'm an employee of this alliance of 9 NSPs. And when we discuss that, they say, you know, Francois, these are difficult days we're living in. We have a war in Ukraine and Russia. We have a very volatile situation in geopolitical area. And our state would never want us to give our data to another country, because you never know where it ends up. Even though we trust our neighbors, there could be cyber attacks. We want to protect ourselves. So there's always a good reason for not doing things, you know.
Yeah, there are a number of concerns,
also
I
in our
understand.
world. But I think that for the time being, with the situation that we are all living, I think that it can be understood that states are being very cautious about where their data goes and what use is made of it. I don't know if it answers the question. Thank you.
It does answer the question very well, and you brought a number of important elements there. So as we're heading towards the end, I would like to ask Keith and Marek, starting with Keith, if there is something you want to add, closing remarks maybe from this webinar.
Thanks, Marina. It's just interesting what Francois said there. At the commission level, unbundling of en route is probably gone, but I think it's something that will probably be hovering in the background. That we could look at future, especially if we get past the technology piece. But so that's really all I have to say. But thanks again, Marina. Thanks,
Keith. Marek, very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. I think when you ask about slow implementation, I see mainly two reasons. The one thing is the process, and the second is the political will. The process is PRB recommends something, goes to the European Commission, then it goes into the Single European Sky Committee, and everything stops there. Because people in the Single European Sky Committee are very often mandated by the national ANSPs, and they're making sure that none of their cake is eaten. So the second one is, of course, if I'm a politician in a government and I'm confronted with the idea to unbundle and force my ANSP to unbundle, I'm not going to win an election on that. The public doesn't really bother. They just want to fly from A to B, and what's happening in the background is not really so relevant to them. And then you put this 8.5 billion euros, what the entire ATM costs are in the European Union, into context with energy and all these other big industries. You know, who's sticking the head out and says, we have to go through this because it's too much trouble for what it's worth? I think from a political point of view, not from my point of view, of course. So this was my closing remark.
Thank you very much, Marek. So unfortunately, we're running out of time. I hope you enjoy this discussion. As I said earlier on, when I was doing my PhD, I found it very difficult to find this information. And what I envision to do with this book is to support other researchers, industry professionals, and academics to understand a little bit more about their traffic management if they're not coming from an engineering background. And I hope that this book is doing that well. So I would like to thank you very much for attending this webinar. This webinar is organized by the European Aviation Conference, a conference that is going to be hosted in Luxembourg end of November, which also the conference is bringing together academia and industry, and also by the German Aviation Research Society. There are more books having a webinar like those. The next one is going to be next Monday. Same time, same place, and it's going to discuss the very important element of airport economics. So thank you very much for attending this webinar again. As I said, the book is available from Routledge. I very hope that you will buy this book, contribute to Orbis, and read and learn more about this very exciting under-researched area on air traffic management. So thank you very much for attending today, and have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you also to all the four fantastic panelists for such a stimulating discussion. Thank you very much, Francois, Keith, Anna, and Marek.